Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that is always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value at a time in history when most people have more on their plates than any one human should. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. Some words people have used to describe me range from speaker, trainer, coach, healer, writer, spiritual advisor, teacher, podcaster, and someone even called me their soul Sherpa once. I'm less concerned with titles or labels and more interested in results, change, and creating a world we want to, can, and are proud to live in. A kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths. They trust in themselves, in life, and recognize that we need each other. And they know how to cultivate healthy relationships to true power, not the very unhealthy kind of power our current culture is predicated upon. Speaking of our culture, there's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and this show aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth D'Alto. You can expect a wide range of topics when you tune into this show. Everything from health, communication, money, success, parenting, desire, sex, love, and spirituality, to making pivots and transitions in life, and topics related to psychology, storytelling, gender and race issues, emotional intelligence, activism, advocacy, and much more. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating and review wherever you listen in from. Thank you so much for being here with me. Here we go. This is episode number 277 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, and I had so much fun talking to today's guest, Tanya Geisler. I literally didn't want the interview to be over. Tanya's expertise is the Imposter Complex. This is based on the Imposter Phenomenon, and it looks at how most women are incapable of internalizing their own success, but totally able to internalize their failures. We talked about how this messes with women's lives in so many ways, primarily isolating you, keeping you out of action, and making you doubt your capacity. Tanya walked me through the behavioral traits that indicate when you're in the imposter complex, how and why this is conditioned into women, the double binds it creates, which was so eye-opening, and how and why the imposter complex shows up. This part is the good news, by the way. We also got into a chat about integrity, unshakable confidence, collective grief, and desire. This is probably a listen more than once type of episode. Enjoy, share it up, let me know what you think, use it as a conversation piece with your friends. And as always, the show notes can be found at untameyourself.com/TT-277. Again, that's untameyourself.com/T as in truth, T as in telling -277. Now for the show. Tanya, you are one of those people that somehow I've never actually done this face-to-face connection with before, but I've known who you are for years. I'm so glad you're here.
We haven't met face-to-face, but we've heart to heart. That's what's happened.
That's what's cool about the internet. It lets you do that amidst the variety of other things that are more akin to a dumpster fire.
And so we begin.
So what's the truth that's having a big impact on your life right now?
So my mama had a mantra, and it was, don't postpone joy. And I've been thinking a lot about that. I always think about that because, I've got this thing that I talk about, your brand of joy. So I think about joy an awful lot. And I'm kind of but lately I'm really just thinking about something else my mom used to love. And that's a Canadian band named Trooper. Do you know Trooper?
Yeah.
And their song was, we're here for a good time, not a long time. And I am it's on repeat in my big brain lately. Like, we are so here for a good time. We are not here for a long time. And what that good time means is it's going to be different for everyone. Yeah. So I'm just really thinking about, the fleeting quality of this wild and precious life.
It really is. So I love this. I love synchronicity. So at the time of recording this, it won't go up for several weeks, but at the time of recording this, I just posted every year around my birthday, I do a solo episode. And this one was on cultivating joy during difficult times. And so I love that you just opened up with, you do something around your brand of joy. Can we talk about joy for a little bit?
Let's totally talk about joy. So, my belief is that we are always, like here, right here. Is this going to show backwards? Is that going to show backwards? Or
I can see it. It says don't postpone joy.
Yeah, that's mama. So I think about, how we're always moving towards that kind of desired emotion. And for me, that I've named that as joy. And joy doesn't mean the same thing. Like, my experience of resonance and where everything's right with the world, that won't be everybody's word. It won't be joy for them. It might be freedom. It might be success. It might be creativity. It might be ebullience. It might be something entirely different. And I think our job is to figure out what that word is for us, and then be able to reverse engineer what else needs to be there for us to experience joy. Yeah. So for me, it's connection and gratitude and generosity. Those are my 3 underpinning values for me to be able to experience joy. And so, to your point, I lost my dad in early January, and it's, and in the midst of that, there was profound joy because of my ability or my knowing to be able to tap into connection and generosity and gratitude. And so I just feel like it's like this fascinating kind of exploration. So what underpins joy for you?
Oh, I love when people ask me questions on my own show because I love having conversations. So as you were saying that yours were connection, gratitude, and generosity, for me, sensuality is certainly one. It's just so amazing to live in a body. And I know as an able-bodied, healthy person who's been athletic my whole life and, I've had injuries here and there, I understand that's probably a large reason why that is for me. So I would just like to acknowledge for people listening if that kind of like hit a sore spot, like if that might not be your experience. But so sensuality, living in a body and like being on earth. So I just started doing stand-up comedy, which relates to one of the other ones, which is laughter. Laughter! People are ridiculous and hilarious, and there's so much out there that is so funny. And I think for me as well, that brings me joy, because if it wasn't funny, it would be tragic and horrendous. So I've always had a way of like finding the humor in a situation, even when it's like wildly inappropriate. And then sure, let me just throw in there reverence and irreverence, because those things, like we get to be here. It is so hard. I made up a word a couple years ago, bliss excruciating.
Oh,
right. And right. So it's simultaneously, and I love that you brought up the thing about that you could be in grief but still access joy. Right? It's not about, none of us are ever going to be in joy 24/7, but even just those moments of joy that are so amazing and profound, it's like that can get you through everything else. So those are my answers. Thank you for asking.
Oh, I need to know this forever and ever and ever. So sensuality, clearly, laughter. What was the second? Being on.
What did I say?
Was it being on this earth? I think it was being on this earth. I think you were saying being on this earth.
To me, that is sensuality. That's like being here, like being embodied, like living on earth. I spent a lot of time. I had like a 3-year like spiritual bypass phase. I lived in a super spiritual community. I was in a relationship where nothing was as it seemed, and so to come back into myself over these last 2 years has been like, I get to be here. I get to be connected to reality. Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
So I am a day away from winding down. I've got a 9-month program, and our last module, the last month, is all about celebration. And oh my God, like, it is near impossible, right? It's so like celebration is so, for me, it's an easy enough thing to do because I know how to access joy, but it's so triggering. It's so, and I think it's this, somebody said it and I can't remember now who said it and I want to attribute them, but it was like, without joy, there is no grief. So the idea of we're only experiencing grief because there was joy.
Yeah.
Oh,
beautiful.
Shit. Right? That just like shifts it all.
And it kind of shows you like everything exists on a spectrum, which is why I'm really not into, and really why I shifted the tone of the podcast in January of this year, because I was leaning way too much into this brand of spirituality that's like too whitewashed, and just not real, not accessible, steeped in so much privilege, and also bypass of like the very, very real things like you're mentioning, like grief, trauma, tragedy, illness, like whatever comes up. This shit is real. We get to be with that too and find the joy within it. So what up? Celebration. Let's dig into this a little bit more, because as well, I run a program called Wild Soul Movement. And I noticed that, you know, we go surrender and release, trust and receiving, wild dreaming and desire, and love and creation. And the place where people get so stuck is trust and receiving. Many people like don't even bridge into, and I've worked on this to like get them through it, the wild dreaming and desire part. And I think that's linked to celebration, because it's about taking up space and honoring yourself and like allowing yourself to want things and feel like worthy and go for it. Son of a question. Just say whatever you want.
So, I mean, yeah, it's tough. It's tough to desire. It's tough to take up the space. It's tough to anticipate other people's response to our celebrations. It's tough to imagine, you know, standing there by ourselves with our sparkler and our party hat and nobody shows up because we can be with each other's grief or sadness, but we can't be with their joy.
Yeah. We had a little tech snafu. You were saying something about that tall poppy syndrome. What is that, if anyone listening doesn't know?
So it's really, it's part of the vernacular in Australian society, and I think the United Kingdom. It's really that experience of being too tall, too much, too beautiful, too brilliant, too. And you need to get cut down to size, sugar. You need to get cut down to size. And it's very visceral, and it's, and I have days of things that I want to say about that, because it is so extremely painful to experience it. And I think even more painful is that unconsciously we've contributed to it. So I think about this in the context of, I talk about we canonize people and then we demonize people, right? Ooh. So we do this like kind of like bell curve of, putting people up on a pedestal. And then when they start to zig when we want them to zag, we cut them down, we demonize them. And again, it's pretty unconscious. And I think it's like I can feel it in my chest as I say, I think this is one of the biggest reasons people are afraid of success, because they have, ancient recollections of having this happen to them, and they've seen where they've participated in it too. Yeah, so messed up.
It's super messed up. Now, you're in Canada, right?
I am.
So this relates to the U.S., but I'm sure you might have an opinion on it otherwise. I think about this often around who we are seeing as our presidential candidates over the last, couple of decades, because it's kind of like, especially our last election, which everyone's pretty familiar with no matter where you live, is like, these are our options. And, but the thing I think about is this, it's like, who would want to take the job? Why would anyone want to put themselves in that position to be just ripped to absolute shreds, regardless of who you are, because it's going to happen either way?
Right. Now, the lazy part of me, I think about just my MPPs in my area, municipal members of parliament. Is that what they're calling it? Members of parliament. And I just think, you've got to go to, every grade 7 graduation. I am just lazy. So that's my, I don't understand why anybody would get into politics. But absolutely. So what does it mean? But I think, I can't imagine that it's any different for somebody who's really driven to be of service to do any of the things that you and I are doing or trying to do, stick our necks out, have harder conversations. I mean, there's obviously lots of differences there between that and politicians. But I mean, if, you have to assume that people are believing what they're standing in, claiming. I'm really trying to work on my ableist language. So call me out if you hear it, okay?
Yeah, me too. Samesies.
Samesies and gendered, please.
All of it.
Gendered, ableist language, okay.
Air 5.
Yeah, so for me, celebration is an integration of all of the hard work that's been done. So it's absolutely critical. It's, the corpse pose and yoga. It's the integration. It's the reminding yourself to rest in celebration. The cycle of exertion is complete. Please, please, please take a moment, integrate all that you've done, because the ego wants to want more than it wants to get, and it's going to make sure that you're on to the next thing. So you must rest in celebration.
Yes.
And it is complicated because of all of those beliefs about, shining too bright, or the grief that shows up again, right? Like, it's like, this means that this is over.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
Oh, okay. So this point, again, and also at the time of recording this, it's Tuesday and my birthday was Friday. And celebrations or birthdays, I think, are interesting. And I had said this to a friend the other day. I'm like, this is the first birthday that I never treated as the finish line for the previous year.
Oh.
Right? Because there's like all this pressure, like all these things I said I wanted to do by the next birthday. And instead of that, I was just like, nah, because this year, this was 35. And something about this felt like it had gravity. For the last few months, I've been looking so forward to it. And it was just like, ooh, like what's emerging? Like what wants to come out? It didn't even matter. It wasn't like, oh, well, what did I accomplish in 34? It didn't even, it was just like, you know what? This is there's something's wanting to emerge. There's like this, it's pulling me forward into this next rotation around the sun. And then I had another girlfriend whose birthday is right after mine. And, traditionally she does these like big birthday celebrations, but like she wasn't feeling like that this year. Mm-hmm. And she was really emotionally tender. And there was just like a lot that she's like 10 years older than me. So she's at a different phase in life. And so there's so much to it. So many layers.
Yeah. So I'm 10 years older than you, and my birthday is next week, and I totally am where your friend is, where I'm really just, I don't feel a particular need to do much this year because we're here for a good time, not a long time. And I'm just really trying to feel into that every day. And so, yeah, the 28th, I don't know, go stand up paddleboarding or something, and it'll feel like a celebration because that's what it felt like last week when I almost got hit by that car and didn't. So I made ravioli.
Yes. So I also really am so glad that you put such an emphasis on resting in celebration. So I literally left the whole day Sunday to rest this past weekend, but to integrate. This is something I didn't get until a couple years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, that we have got to integrate. We are such a consumer culture in so many ways, and not just like, material goods. We are reading blogs, we're reading books, we are listening to podcasts and things all the time. We're on social media, consume. Mm-hmm. What are we actually integrating? How do we make progress?
I had this moment. So I'm about to relaunch my my podcast, In the Spotlight with Tanya Geisler, and I was planning on doing that the day before my birthday because that's what I do, right? Like, it's my birthday, I'm gonna sell, right?
Yeah.
And I had this moment. So when is this going live?
That's a great question. Sometime in October.
Okay, great. So I can say this. So this week that we're shooting, I've got 25 people coming from all around the world, Haiti, England, to celebrate the completion of the Academy. I was going to launching a beta program. I was going to launch my podcast. I'm also hosting a 50th birthday party for my sister at my house on my birthday because I figure that's the only way I can get her to my house. That's like in a way that she would want to see pictures of herself, right? So there's a lot of shit happening over but it took me, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning that I went, I don't actually have to launch the podcast on the 27th of September because that's what I told myself. I can do it whenever I want, but I needed the quiet of 1 a.m. when I'm not actually on my phone to hear myself. And that's really, so this is a reminder for myself as much as anybody else. Elton John on the 25th also on our anniversary. So
amazing.
Just like, very, very busy. But point is, it's a reminder to myself, I need to rest in the celebration. So the 28th is nothing except for the 50th birthday party for my sister.
So awesome. Yeah, it's super important. So I'm also really excited to talk to you about another like core tenet of your work, which you call the imposter complex. I've also heard called imposter syndrome. And this is something that I've never really talked about because this is something I don't actually experience. And it's interesting because, sometimes, you'll see people post about like men do this or white people do this. And people want to be like, not all white people or not all men, right? And I see people like, all entrepreneurs have imposter syndrome. And I'm like, not all entrepreneurs. But I know it is something that really plagues most people. I don't know. I'm a freak and I don't have this experience. So I'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit. And then I'll ask you some questions about it.
You want me to talk about your freakishness or the
okay. No.
Okay, right.
Yeah, let's talk all about me in this interview. No, imposter complex, please.
So I always start with a history lesson because I'm all about attributing the teachers. So it's actually Imposter Phenomenon is the term coined by psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes in 78. And it's a pretty gendered conversation because that's where the research started. They were working with high-functioning, high-achieving women, and they realized or they noticed this through line that these women seemed incapable of internalizing their success. Okay, so any proof of success they would attribute to luck or fluke or timing or having somehow managed to deceive people into thinking they're smarter or more capable than they actually were.
Wow.
Their failures, they were more than able to internalize. Okay?
Wow.
So, yeah. So you hear it referred to as the imposter syndrome. And trust me, like if I didn't have, this actually really pisses me off that I can't use it because SEO hates imposter complex. But imposter syndrome's actually incorrect because it's not a clinical diagnosis.
All right.
So complex is actually more appropriate, or phenomenon, or Amy Cuddy talks about it as, what does she call it? Imposter experience. So it's really the sense of it's just a matter of time before they find out that you're not as capable or talented as they thought you were.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, it has 3 main objectives. It wants to keep you out of action. It wants you to doubt your capacity, and it wants to have you feeling alone and isolated.
Ooh.
Yeah. And there are, 12 very specific lies that it has us believe. I mean, that's like a whole other show unto itself. But I think probably the most interesting part I'm going to go ahead and make up. I mean, the 12 lies are fascinating, and I can send you the link to share that.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes.
Cool. The behavioral traits that we go to hide out in so we avoid feeling like the imposter are probably pretty familiar and pretty common. And this is, when I connected with you, I was saying like I'm really trying to expand and deepen my analysis of my work as it relates to this because these behavioral traits are associated with the imposter complex, and they're also associated with all sorts of other things that are going on.
Yeah.
So those traits are, I'll just name them. We can dive into those, but they're, procrastination and perfectionism and leaky boundaries and people pleasing and diminishment and comparison. So we go to these behaviors to avoid feeling like the imposter because we don't want to get found out that we're the imposter. But they're all these double binds. And so like when I go to people pleasing, which happens to be my tell, I want to make sure that I'm like part of the group and I belong and I'm going to use my charm and I'm going to really make sure that you like me. And then when I'm given an opportunity, though, I chalk it up to they just liked me. It has nothing to do with my depth and wisdom and capabilities in this realm. So that makes me feel more like the imposter. So it's this so that's why I'm endlessly fascinated with this, because it's this, like I say, it gets you coming and going. And that's true for each of those behavioral traits.
Yeah. Say more about diminishment. I'm curious. In my mind, I am making an assumption about what it means, but I want to check first.
Yeah. So diminishment's kind of a cool one, because here how do I frame this? Our sense of our capacity is actually sort of expanded in this place. Like, we actually know that we're up to some good stuff. We're really, we understand that we've got some excellence in this realm, but we've been taught to not shine too brightly. Yeah. So in an attempt to not get called out or seen or be that target, we will diminish, we'll dim our light, we will shroud, we'll use the less than confident bio, we won't promote, we'll do all these things and then we're getting less than stellar results, which has us feeling like an imposter, right? Like, other people are having greater success than I am, so why, so I must be the imposter, I must not belong here. So it's that kind of we have, and there's a lot of what Joe Casey refers to as feminine conditioning that's happening here. So there's a whole other layer of this conversation, because it is gendered in some ways, in the sense that the research started with women, and we know that men and men-identified folks have this experience as well. And because of so many of these behavioral traits being feminine conditioning, diminishment, perfectionism, these things that we know quite well anecdotally, and science shows that those are the behaviors that we're really accustomed to going towards. And again, it just exacerbates the experience of feeling like an imposter. We think we're hiding out, but we're actually making it worse for ourselves. So, and there's something else I want to say about, diminishment, for instance. It feels like this is just the reality of it. People pleasing is a survival mechanism. It's a survival mechanism people use, if you've been oppressed or marginalized. Diminishment, again, like, there's a safety quality to it. So these behavioral traits aren't bad. They actually start from really fantastic places, or purposeful places, or important places. But when they really get in the way of what we're here to do, that's where I get the stingy tears in my eyes, and I can't be with it.
Yeah. This is interesting. So the day after my birthday, I posted just like a snuggling morning birthday selfie on Instagram. And, one of the things I said was that I'm feeling a much more sensual, potent expression is like bubbling up under my skin. And I said, this is day one of honoring that expression more than I resist any unwanted response or attention. Which feels like exactly what you were just talking about. So it's like, and there is something really interesting too, because as I've been unpacking my privilege, the various privileges I have, there's a part of me that feels in a way that I've never felt in my life before. Not that I don't deserve to take up space, but that I should not be taking up space. So it's really complex.
Complex? Absolutely. And there's no question there. So there's no one answer either. One of the things that I've really, I just said this recently. I'm like, holy shit, that's so true. To, that expression, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I've been hammering the crap out of the imposter complex for like 11 years. And so, I see it in everything. And I say with, just truth, that I'm just starting to recognize that maybe it's not always a nail, maybe it's a microaggression. Yeah. Maybe it's fat phobia. Maybe it's anxiety. Maybe it's racism. So there's a lot. Maybe it's trauma. Maybe it's. So all of these things these experiences that masquerade, mimic, replicate the same, right? Yeah. Of the imposter complex, that's really where really trying to sort of peel back with care. And it happened, I mean, there's not a single time. So I do a lot of speaking, and I do a lot of speaking, interestingly, or I don't know how, with women engineers, women and women identified. Yeah. So, you know, I have my whole process. It's rock solid. It's proven. I've helped people really step into some incredible things. And there's always, and I say always, but maybe it's like, 9.5 times out of 10, the questions and answer period, which is always my favorite.
Same.
Right? Yes, totally, right? Because you know exactly, you're answering the things that people really, really, really want to know about.
Yeah.
Generally, there's somebody who's going to stand up and say, this is all really helpful. I see myself in lots of this. But what do you do if you literally have somebody come into your lab and say, you don't belong here as a woman of color? Or, like I said, it's a Black woman. And every time, up until April of 2018, I've been saying, holy shit. Like, I'm so sorry that is your lived experience. That's egregious. That's not the imposter complex. That's a microaggression, and you need to take that to your human resources or some variation. And that's true, and it's insufficient. It's insufficient that I'm not giving that person more of something else to be able to dig into. Yeah. So that's when I reached out to my coach, Desiree Attaway, and said, help me really unpack this. And so I know that she's been a guest here as well. Yeah. And help me to really let's deepen into this liberatory consciousness of which you speak. And I'm in the awareness now. Help me with the analysis, or point me in the right direction. And I've been doing my analysis. So that's the exploration. So I don't have the answers, and I know the imposter complex like the back of my hand when that's what we're dealing with. I've got the tools, processes, but when we're dealing with somebody else, I may not be the person who is best here to support you. And so that's meant handing over the mic, handing over the stage, handing over the everything. And that's what has to be done. Yeah.
And even that. And so what you just said to me brings up imposter in a more traditional and direct sense of the word, which is, and this isn't people listening to the show. There are a lot of entrepreneurs, but not everyone is an entrepreneur. But no matter what someone's job is, this comes up. This even comes up in conversation when someone asks you something. I know Brene Brown talks about this. Like, can you remember the last time you said, I don't know? Can you remember the last time you said, I'm not the right person for that? Or maybe you should ask someone else. Or, you know what, let me get back to you. I actually have no idea. Most people are looking for the right answer. They want to have it. They feel like they should. They'll be valued. Who the hell wants to say I don't know? I personally love saying I don't know because I can't pretend. I just started doing stand-up comedy. The hardest part for me about it is embellishing, elaborating, and creating an act. Even just the word act is so hard for me. So that's a creative edge. But it's just super interesting how people are actually acting all the time, unconsciously.
Absolutely. And it's dangerous. It's really dangerous. And we'd rather give false information than, integrity is quite a problem, right?
We'd rather give false information. And this is and it's just proliferated because of the internet. Oh, man. Quick break in the show to give you a Patreon update. I am loving the platform over there. Some of you know, and some of you are already members over at patreon.com/Elizabeth Untamed. But if you don't know what it's all about, it's this amazing platform that lets artists and creatives and activists and other kinds of entrepreneurs share their work in an exclusive way with fans and followers and people who just want to get access to specific things. So what I post over at Patreon are Wild Soul Movement practice videos, 2 bonus podcast episodes a month, which are very similar to the Sunday sermons for those of you who used to enjoy those. And as well, I recently added a tier for those who are interested in just getting my stand-up comedy clips and videos from shows and open mics and ideas and feedback on premises and punchlines and things that I'm working on as I develop as a stand-up comedian. So it's super fun. The first official show I did a few weeks ago was called Does This Make Me Look Spiritual? And I went all in on my experiences living in a new age hippie community in San Diego for 3 years. So that was super fun. And that full set is up and available in Patreon. So head on over to patreon.com/Elizabeth Untamed. I keep those things exclusively over there. They do not get posted publicly in full anywhere on the internet other than Patreon. So if you're interested in that stuff, head on over to check it out. And now back to the show. So I want to talk about procrastination for a moment, because since I started doing my Wild Soul Movement work in 2013, one of the things that I've actually noticed is that sometimes procrastination is actually higher intelligence intervening. And so I am wondering if you have any handy distinctions between when that's true and when it's imposter complex.
So, so the imposter complex is really like, it's pretty garden variety when you know it's not, what's the thing that you said?
Excruciating.
Excruciating, right? If it's excruciating, it's not the imposter complex. Okay? If it's actually, let me think about that. Hang on. Let me get back to you. No.
Yes.
For real. I've got an answer for you. No, actually, I'm so wrong about that. If you're dragging your heels on it and it's excruciating, then it is the imposter complex.
Got it. Strike it, reverse it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if it's something like you really, really want this thing, and you're sitting on top of it and you're biting your nails and you've got anxiety and stress and sleeplessness and all of these things because you want it so badly, which is the only time it shows up, by the way. The imposter complex only shows up on the precipice of that which we desire. For me, like, I like yoga. I love yoga. I have zero need to be excellent or masterful or, like the shiny bright star of that, right? I have no need for that. So I don't experience it there. In my parenting, in my work, in my writing, in my speaking, holy doodle, that's where it's going to show up. So if you want this, but you are creating your own roadblocks, then that's the imposter complex. And so what happens here is we kind of hide out because we don't want to have that. We're so sure that we're going to be found out that it's not for us or we don't belong or whatever it is. So we're going to hedge and, we're going to just like languish in this place of putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And then one of two things is going to happen. So speaking again to that double bind, we're either going to knock it out of the park, like we do, which all that does is lets us know on a neural pathway that this is actually our process, that this is actually how we have to do this. I only am really successful at something if I have the anxiety and sleeplessness and worry and anxiety and all of that sort of stuff. But and nobody else has to go through that, so clearly I'm the imposter. Or the other thing that's going to happen is we waited so long to prepare for that talk. We didn't train. We didn't do our due diligence. We didn't do all the things that we normally would do. So we produced substandard results. And all that reminds us that we didn't deserve the opportunity in the first place, that we are the imposter. So that's how it gets us coming and going. So if there's no, if you don't have that bliss, oh my God, say it again.
Bliss, excruciating. So think blissed out plus excruciating.
Yeah, I know. It's the excruciating part. Bliss, excruciation. If you don't have that and you're just sort of like, it's a should or not to, definitely that's your higher self saying, no. Move on. You've got bigger fish to fry.
This is huge. Something big for me in the last 2 years has been really, I call it unconsuming myself from all of the things that I was in pursuit of because I thought I should. And then realizing that I actually didn't give a shit. And one of those things was 7-figure business. I spent so much time since 2011, the last 7 years. Well, I'll say 6 because not this year at all, really. inserted into these groups of like online entrepreneurs and like very successful friends, people who make, you know, all kinds of money and whatever and want to build empires. I have no desire to build an empire. Zero.
Yeah.
I realized that. I only just realized like the other month. I was like, oh, I don't care about being famous. I don't care about that. Like, I just want to, like, people say die empty, or people on the podcast have heard me say this Irma Bombeck quote before, which is, when I stand before God at the end of my life, I just want to be able to say I used everything you gave me. It's literally all I care about. Like, my highest care is that.
Yeah.
And just so leaving even some Facebook groups with entrepreneurs, this whole group that was supposed to go to Necker Island, I backed out of that group, and I'm just like, I'm out. I'm disengaged.
Yeah.
And it's like, I did that like in February. Liberation. It has felt so good.
Yeah. So I'm going to get it wrong. But I'm going to do my best. So Jen McCabe, who has work called Lead, Gather, Relate, talks about, oh my God, she's going to kill me, but not being able to participate in that which you oppose.
Yeah.
And, right? So building an empire is kind of antithetical for those of us who are trying to tear down the patriarchy. Like, we have to get that right before we can engage. Yeah. Yep. So, right. Like the models that we're seeing are just replications of same shit. La plus ça change. Right. So, I mean, I think that's higher self stuff right there.
Yeah.
That's just.
Yeah, and I mean, anyone listening, I mean, I'm always urging people to inquire and to examine and to just question, like, is this mine? Do I want this? Because my soul is like, we must do this thing, or have or be or whatever, or meet that person or go this place, whatever it is. Or is it that ego being like, yes, no one will love me if I don't, or I won't have any friends if I decide not to, blah, blah, blah.
Caroline McHugh is a coach. I've never met her, but I've seen her TEDx talk. And she was talking about the collective grief after Prince and David Bowie died, and how, when you see somebody like that, it's like they've swallowed the moon. And the collective grief around seeing somebody who is really stepped into their power. And the reason we have a hard time reconciling that is we have so few models of that.
Yes.
Right. And so that was Aretha. And so I feel like this is a different tangent, but it's not. It's really, for me, that's the meeting, I've used everything you gave me, is my version of stepping into your starring role, which is like stepping into the U-shaped space that the universe has carved out for us. Mm-hmm. So that's what so that's going to look entirely different for, that doesn't necessarily mean seven figures. It might for some. It doesn't necessarily mean, whatever the trappings are, but we have to know for ourselves what that is.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Thank you for saying that like that, by the way, because I'm never shaming anything, right? Like if that's their thing, great. Like I know so many people want to like make all this money so they could just turn around and give it back. Do great things for people, and that's fine.
For me, I'll just say this. Every time I level up financially, my accountant loves to say, just dig a bigger hole. So, like, I have to recognize for myself that, like, I just put, like, more into the business, and I this is really my work is to be far more philanthropic. So, thank you for reminding me about that, because that's actually really important to me, and I'm, Yeah.
Yeah, one of my teachers, I've done a ton of training in energy work and energy healing and stuff like that. And one of my teachers was like, "Yeah, you tithe." Like, and for the first time ever, I understood what tithing meant. It wasn't just like this thing you do because you're supposed to, because the church is passing around the basket and you got to put something in it or you're going to feel bad. It's like you give your money where you get your spiritual food. I was like, oh, I get it now. Right. And for some people, that's their church. For me, I send money to like the Wildlife Association sometimes, or the Nature Conservancy, because I get my spiritual food by the ocean, or the Surfrider Foundation. I'm like, yes, please, let's clean this shit up. you know?
So I like, for me, this is why it's important that I'm just naming this, to remind myself, because I've got a strategy. I got the boxes checked. We do international, we do national, we do local, we do, like, so we've got our little strategy and structure. There's no heart in it. There's no heart in it. So you're reminding me about that. So thank you.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. Or, it's funny. I have some amazing friends. This is one of my biggest blessings in my life. Wise women, many years older than me. It's like getting to flip ahead a couple chapters in the book and be like, I make it through this. Everyone makes it through this phase. And I shouldn't say everyone, many people, and I have proof that it's possible. But sometimes I just send them my money. I'm like, listen, do whatever you want with it, but you were my spiritual food this month. You just were. Deal with it.
Ugh. Spiritual food. I love it.
Yeah, this is so great. I love the different webs that this conversation has been weaving so far. We talk about boundaries a lot on the show, so I don't feel like we need to go there. But people pleasing, which I know is directly tied to boundaries, but people pleasing is another one of those things that I never really noticed I was doing.
Yeah.
Because my friend, do you know who Terry Cole is?
Yes.
So Terry is one of my really, really, really close friends. She's been on the podcast 3 times. Everyone loves Terry's episodes. And she calls it over-functioning or like high-functioning. So like, a lot of us listening, you're like super successful, you're really intelligent. And so the way we do things are so much more subtle. There's so much more like disguised and undercover, right? Like no one would think I would do people-pleasing things, but I've noticed over the years that I have. So I'm curious for you. Let's call it like covert and overt people-pleasing if you want to. What does it look like?
So people pleasing has actually become a bit of when somebody says to me or give me the beautiful, well-intended compliment of people really like Tanya Geisler, like it's hard not to love Tanya Geisler, I go, oh shit, like we've got some projection happening. It's actually a problem for me. Like that's usually when I'm like, all right, we need to recalibrate. So people pleasing and leaky boundaries are connected. So that's the other thing I was going to say about those behavioral traits. They often sort of like play off of each other.
Yeah.
And leaky boundaries, people pleasing, it's actually, I use them diagnostically as they point me to a crisis is far too big of a word, but I've got to watch out for integrity. So the opposite experience for me of the imposter complex is unshakable confidence. So like Elizabeth, forgive my projection, but this is who I've seen. Like you are unshakably confident. That's how I see you. That's how I feel you. That's how you're received. To be certain, you wobble. To be certain, you've got fears. To be certain, you've got self-doubt. To be certain, all of that is true. And you move forward in the world with a quality of unshakable confidence. It's really beautiful to witness. And
thank you.
You're welcome. 2 words the imposter complex hates more than anything else is thank you, because that means we actually have allowed that to land. So yeah.
See, I told you I don't have it. Just kidding. It just felt like the right thing to say. Keep going.
It's the perfect thing to say. So there are 3. There are these 3 legs to the stool of unshakable confidence, and those are integrity and presence and action. So, so when I see people pleasing and leaky boundaries, those will point me in the direction that something's a little funky with the integrity there. Right. That doesn't mean that somebody doesn't have integrity. It means that there's a bit of a crisis. There's a wobble there. So that's where we need to come back to honoring, like, having an obedience. I don't love that word, but having an obedience to our vision. Showing up authentically, again, so overused, but then honoring our word to ourselves and to others. And so we have a mutual friend, Tara McMullen, was nay Gentily, and she's my model for integrity. Like when I taught this class last year, she was like literally like my model, because she really is obedient to her word. Obedient to her vision. She honors her word. She does exactly what she says she's going to do. And she's authentic. And so she's been my model for that. So when I see, like I say, so when I see people pleasing, when I see leaky boundaries, that's where I have people kind of, well, not kind of, come back to themselves. And oftentimes it's that not honoring their word to themselves. Yeah. So that's where we get into the situation where we're going to say yes when we mean no to other people and to ourselves, when we compromise our own integrity. We allow people to take our time or take our energy or take our whatever it is, because we're having a crisis of integrity.
Do you have a working definition for integrity?
Well, I always say, but here's the ableist language coming up. So I've got to revise this. Maybe you can help me. If you don't stand for something, you fall for everything. That is, like, for me, that's integrity's motto. So that's what that's how I understand it. And again, I seem to think of things in three, and really that comes down to, like, you know, having, allowing yourself to be authentically true, being obedient to your vision, which requires you to know what your vision is, and then honoring your word, doing what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
Do you have another definition?
Well, I'm curious. The ableist thing, is it ableist because you're saying stand? That cannot be metaphorical because it implies standing on 2 feet?
No. I mean, I think we got to go so far that way. I think that's important that Like some people can't stand. Yeah.
I take it. You know, it's interesting. Someone asked me my definition of integrity on a Facebook post the other day, and I wrote something out, and I'm not remembering what I said verbatim, but it was along the lines of doing the work to know and honor who I am as like an ever-evolving being, and like define my values and priorities and live like with my highest truth and understand, like my current highest truth and understanding in accordance with what are my values and what are my priorities. As long as the asterisk is, it's not harming anyone. So it's like, because a friend of mine said this many years, it was like 4 years ago, my friend Stephanie Kwong, the highest form of integrity is honoring yourself. And I was like, you know, that's been a guidepost for me, because I love the book, The Four Agreements, and, you know, one of the agreements is always keep your word or something like that. Be impeccable with your word. And I realized, there was the slip. I took it as always keep your word, but be impeccable with your word means say what you mean in all times and be really honest. So I'm a person, I'm still working on this. I have a huge capacity. It sounds like when you were saying earlier, I'm doing a birthday party and I was going to launch this and I'm wrapping up a program. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, she's not a Virgo, but she's Virgo-ish. And I'm like, she's in the Libra, but whatever. I have a huge capacity and a huge enthusiasm for life. And
yes,
so
you do.
I'm not saying yes because I'm people pleasing. I'm saying yes because I have a deep desire to like go to and do all these things. But I've learned about myself, especially now that I track my menstrual cycle, which I know not everyone has that access or is in that phase of life or even has it for whatever health reason. But I'm better at going, I shouldn't say yes to that yet, if that's going to be like after day 20. You know what I mean? But because there's always like things we can't anticipate, like I'm going to get sick or whatever, or like I'm working on something or had this spot of grief come up. And you know what? I'm not getting out of bed today. So my version of integrity and being impeccable with my word has become not so much as trying to force myself to do things I said I would do just because I said I would do them, but just being just real open with people. Like, I'm really sorry. I've gotten really good at apologies. When I said yes to this, I really wholeheartedly wanted to come, and now I can't. And without over-explaining myself.
Yeah. And that, for me, there's an honoring of your word to yourself, but also that obedience to your vision, right? This is you, like fully steeped in, you know, hers is vision. And if I'm going to get to the end of my life, just like having used everything I was given, that required me to be obedient to my vision. Yeah.
I love that. I really love that term, be obedient to my vision. And I feel like that's actually a great articulation of when I say, you know, live in alignment with your values and priorities, that's being obedient to the vision.
Right. So can we talk a little bit about presence? Because I think this is also something that you model so beautifully.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. So this, when I see or witness people who are in diminishment and comparison. That's showing me that there is again, crisis is too, like a wobble. It's called a wobble.
I like how
presence.
you use wobble. Crisis sounds very dramatic.
Very dramatic. And sometimes it is, right? Sometimes it
can be. It can be.
Right? That's the friend that you call it, like, whatever, right? It's like going to get you out of the situation. But for the most part, it's a wobble. And this is where, do you know Lena West?
Yes.
Get to know Lena West. If you don't know her well, she's incredible. She's my model for presence. So she is, so I just love to speak about, it's so easy to speak about her power. She knows herself, and there's a reverence for self. And so those are the triumvirate for me of presence. So really knowing and also having a responsibility for your power.
Yes.
Yeah. And knowing yourself, which is an ongoing thing. It's actually interesting. I'll say that for the most part in this landscape, when I have these conversations, knowing yourself is not quite so tricky. Like when I take this work outside of this kind of coaching, healing, entrepreneurial space, like it's a little bit different, but knowing yourself is sort of like, done, check, got that mostly. I'm an evolving, human having this experience. Like I get that, but right now I know this, but that reverence for self, that's the real linchpin of the presence piece. So if we don't have that reverence, that's where we slip into diminishment. That's where we slip into comparison, because we're not revering.
Do you ever work with any kind of like oracle cards? Are you into that stuff or not really?
I have them worked on for me. I mean, I get lots of readings, but I don't myself do any readings.
Okay.
Same one.
One of my favorite decks is by a woman named Alana Fairchild. It's the Rumi Oracle. Each one has a Rumi poem, and then there's this beautiful thing. And there's this card in the deck. The name of the card is Resplendent with Grace. And one of the things that it says in that card is like, if you could actually see everything that you are, you would just, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but it's like you would die laughing. You would fall on the ground laughing at actually how magnificent you are compared to how like small you've been treating yourself, seeing yourself, being out in the world. And I love that so much because it's like what you were just saying. It is really funny. We look at ourselves and we see this tiny, it's too much, it's this, we're comparing, and it's really, we're each this magnificent, like unbelievable, like it doesn't matter who you are, where you're listening from, your abilities, your capabilities, your wealth, who's your family, what's the color, like each one of us, literally so miraculous and magnificent, so hard to see.
So hard to see. And that's why there's this U-shaped space in the universe that's carved out for you, and your job is to really fully step into that. But you won't do that if you don't have the reverence for yourself. Like that's the thing.
Yeah, that is good stuff. Tanya, is there anything I did not ask you that you were like, damn,
I
was really hoping she would ask me this?
You didn't ask me this because this is so like you're not your thing either. But the third leg of the stool is action.
Okay, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, you're like, wait.
But let's talk about it because I know it's not everyone's thing. This is, like we said, this is not about me.
So this is, if procrastination, perfectionism are showing up, then action's what needs to, like, that's clearly what the wobble is. So this is really in the land of having a willingness to fail. Come on. I'm not going to pretend you're going to love it. I'm so much more a fan of learning from my wins than my failures, but having a willingness to fail, right? And some resilience and tenacity. And that's what you need to get into action. That's all there is to it. That's all there is to it. Listen, all of this is simple, not easy. And so those are the three legs of the stool. And this is like, I can safely say this is the reason the Imposter Complex does not run your show, Elizabeth D'Alto, because you do have such an innate understanding of integrity, presence, and action. Not only do you have an understanding, that is how you move through the world. Right. It's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, action. I think I always credit, have you ever heard of Cutco knives?
No.
I sold knives. My first, quote, real job was selling knives to people in their homes. And I was killer at it. But the reason I was killer is because it was just about doing more appointments. And I was like, oh, so I just, called everyone in my high school directory. When I was done with that, I called everyone in my brother's middle school directory. It was just like you said, simple, not easy. But to me, my brain was like, oh, I just have to do more appointments. I literally just went, great, I will just do more appointments. So I was quite successful because I just did it. And that's when I was starting when I was 19. And so that kind of accidentally fell into this programming of oh, if you just keep going, you will eventually get a result. It might not be the desired result, but it will be a result, and you'll either learn or it'll go fantastic, or both.
Yes. So everybody paying attention. There's that willingness to fail. There's that resilience, and there's that tenacity. There's, that's the triumvirate for Elizabeth DiAlto's recipe to be in action. So my desire on your behalf, though, is to pay attention to that when you are at an edge, when you are at your next precipice of expansion, pay attention to which one of those behavioral traits you might want to go to. And then let me...
Oh, super. So behavioral, coming back. You know what? It's really interesting because I'm at that precipice right now because I'm getting into stand-up comedy. And I can see a couple of them. That's actually cool. I'll send you a message about this because that's something to definitely sit with and do some journaling.
Love it.
But yeah, it's so interesting. Tanya, you are so great. I knew you were going to be great, but you surpassed my expectations. Is that a weird thing to say to someone? I say weird things to people all the time. It doesn't matter.
I love it.
So your website is your name, TanyaGeisler.com. And we're going to put everything in the show notes. Those 12 things. What were the 12 things? Because I saw them on your site.
12 lies.
Yeah. 12 lies. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Always good to uncover lies we're telling ourselves. Are you on the social medias? Do you have any place you like people to follow you there?
Well, follow me on Instagram because then I'll be more inspired to do Instagram stories because I just don't do them. And I think I really love them.
They're so fun.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just, it's just little snippets. You feel like you just get to talk to people and share whatever. I have no strategy behind mine. I mostly love Instagram stories because my life is a series of events that I wish people were around to see. And because I have Instagram stories, I'm like, y'all, you never believe this. I just saw a woman take a bite out of a sausage and put it back at the hot food bar at Whole Foods. Who does that? You
did not see that.
Oh, yeah, I did. And I had a whole Instagram story about it. And I was dying. I was doing the cry, talking, laughing thing where people can't even understand what you're saying anyway. Literally, who does? But that's what I like Instagram stories for. But please discover your own expression.
Love it.
So thank you so much. I also just really want to say how much I appreciate people who were just so solid and so deep in their work. I love you were I know this like the back of my hand. I've been doing this for 11 years. It's just always so great to just drop in with folks who just know their shit. Yeah. It's pretty much anyone I have on the podcast, but
that's true.
And in the age of the influencer where anyone could set up an Instagram account and suddenly be an expert of a thing they have very little experience in. It's lovely to speak with an actual expert of a thing,
I really want to come see you do stand-up. I really, really do. I'm going to follow this because I often say I'll go anywhere to see somebody really stepped into what they're here to do. I mean, you are here to do so much and this new expression. I'm in. So
Thanks.
I've been needing to get out your way for some time.
Are you in Vancouver? Are you a Western Canada person or where are you?
No, I'm in Toronto.
You're in Toronto. Oh, I love Toronto. Okay, cool. This is all great to know. All right, I guess I'll let you go. This is one of those interviews where I'm like, but don't go, but also you have a life. So fine, I'll let you. Again, thank you so much. Everyone listening, I can feel it. I know you're going to be sending me the messages, the DMs, following Tanya. This was good stuff that I know is going to apply to a lot of people. So share this one with your friends, tell people about it, leave a rating, leave a review, all the good stuff. Tanya, for the 38th time, thank you so much. Happy early birthday, and I'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
We've all seen videos and pictures of thin women, particularly, eating large amounts of food. And then when you read the comments, people are like, oh, all these great things about how awesome she is. And just like that quote said, if the woman, especially if it's a woman, eating large quantities of food, like I remember I saw this video of a thin woman eating like a 40-ounce steak. I mean, it was like huge. And the comments were so celebratory. But if she were 50 pounds heavier, it would have been a totally different story. And so we have learned to equate body size with health.